All right, we are in lesson 3.7, Human Impact on Evolution. Make sure you pause the video to write down your learning goal, and then when you're ready, press play and let's continue. So our first guiding question is, how can human actions drive evolution? We usually think of nature as like the only force or the main force behind evolution, but what if I told you that we as humans are the most powerful forces driving evolution today? And that's because of environmental changes caused by us humans. And I'm talking about pollution, habitat destruction, and climate change, and even the introduction of and the overuse of antibiotics. These can create something called a selective pressure, which affects organisms and determines who survives and reproduces and who dies. So for our next guided question, we're going to be looking at an example of how humans affected the environment and affected survival of different animals. So for our guided question, we're going to be looking at how did air pollution affect which moths survived. So we're going to be thinking about the Industrial Revolution before and after. So before the Industrial Revolution, we had trees that were light colored, and there were two main types of moths. There was a dark variation and there was a light variation. So due to the factories having a lot of pollution and you see like a lot of smoke, the trees darkened over time. And through this darkening, you had a shift on the different types of organisms that survived. So we have their predator, which was the bird. Before the Industrial Revolution, the birds were able to easily locate the dark-colored moths and eat those. And then the light-colored moths, because they blended in, they kind of camouflaged into the trees, they were less visible to their predators and they got eaten less. But due to the fact that humans, again, created a more polluted environment and the trees got darker, this shifted the amount of dark moths that survived. And after the Industrial Revolution, the birds were able to easily recognize the light-colored moths. So the dark-colored moths survived and reproduced, and the lighter-colored moths almost went extinct. So let's now talk about how humans could impact evolution, specifically of bacteria. So there's something that will affect me and you today, which is something called antibiotic resistance. Antibiotics are medications, and I'm just going to annotate that for you so you remember. And they're used to treat bacterial infections. Every time we take antibiotics that we don't need, we are helping bacteria evolve resistance. It's called survival of the fittest. So those that resist the drug survive and reproduce. And eventually, we get something called superbugs, which is bacteria that cannot be treated with medicine at all. And this could cause a lot of deaths. So antibiotics, again, are the only effective cure against bacteria. So there are some people who accidentally take it for illnesses caused by viruses or just silly cold, flu, and for even sore throat, which is unnecessary because it's exposing bacteria to these antibiotics, allowing them to build up resistant bacteria that survive and multiply. Taking antibiotics for infections that you don't always require are very bad. Or if you stop treatment too soon, even if you feel better, it's very important that you take the entire course of antibiotics so that you don't leave any resistant bacteria behind. Now, when I mean resistant, I'm talking about stop working. And for this, again, you don't need to take it for a strep throat. You don't need to take it for a cold. You want to make sure that all of the drug-resistant bacteria die off in the first place. So now we're going to talk about how can introducing a new species or an invasive species disrupt evolution. When we move species into a new place, intentionally or not, they can destroy the food web. So this kind of happened with an organism called the cane toads. So these cane toads were brought to Australia to eat beetles in 1935, which were pests in the gardens. But instead, they spread rapidly, poisoning animals and disrupting the ecosystem. Over time, they had very poor ecological impacts. So the native predators that were naturally keeping things in check, their population declined, it decreased, while the cane toad population increased. The ecological impacts were the decline of the native species, and overall, it was just a bad experience for it. So their environment started to go through a lot of issues. So what is the main idea of evolution? It's that evolution happens through a process called natural selection, where individuals with traits that are better suited for the environment survive and reproduce. And the pressure that drives this process is called a selective pressure. The selective pressure is any factor in the environment that makes it harder for some individuals to survive while making it easier for others to survive. This again could include predators, availability of food, diseases, and importantly, changes caused by us humans. Examples of selective pressure that you can always talk about, that we spoke about in this lesson, is air pollution and the overuse of antibiotics. So traits that increase survival reproduction tend to become more common in future generations. What I want you to take apart from this video is that evolution is not random. It is directed by selective pressures.